When I was 13, I learned two things in one night: that childhood doesn't last forever, and that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the first to throw you away. My name's Jonah, and I'm 28 now, but I still remember the color of the sky that evening, muddy blue, with streaks of gray, when my parents told me to grow up, and then left me at a rest stop 70 miles from home. I slept in a ditch that night, using my hoodie as a pillow and my backpack as a shield from the wind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there, staring up at the stars and waiting for the sun to rise. I never spoke to them again. Not until last week, when an envelope slid through my mail slot. It was my sister's wedding invite. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from my parents, neatly folded and smelling like the perfume my mother used to wear. "Let's put the past behind us," it said. Just like that. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't left a kid on the side of the highway. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The thing about people like my parents is that they're not monsters right away. It starts small. Passive-aggressive comments at dinner. Eye rolls when you talk about something that excites you. Cold silence instead of comfort. By the time you realize it's not normal, you've already convinced yourself that you're the problem. I was the youngest of three. My sister, Celine, was 4 years older than me and the golden child from birth. She had this effortless way of making people like her. Teachers, neighbors, even complete strangers. She'd smile, toss her hair, and everyone would melt. My older brother, Nate, was only 2 years older than me, and, honestly, I don't think he ever saw me as more than an annoyance. I was the afterthought, the oops baby, the one who came along when my mom was already thinking about going back to work full-time and my dad had just started his own landscaping business. I guess I messed up their plans. We lived in a split-level house on a dead-end street in a town so small it didn't even have a movie theater. Our backyard backed up to woods, and the three of us used to build forts out there when we were younger. I used to think we were close, but looking back, I was just the tag-along. The kid they humored until they got bored. I'd always be the lookout when they played games, or the one left behind to guard the base, while they snuck off and did their own thing. That feeling of being tolerated, not wanted, it started early. But I was a quiet kid. Polite, good at school, never really caused trouble. So at first, my parents just kind of ignored me. I guess they figured that since I wasn't demanding attention, I didn't need it. My mom would go whole days without saying more than a few words to me. My dad mostly talked to me in grunts unless he needed something carried or fetched. But Celine? She got full conversations. Warm hugs. Encouragement. Nate got lectures about being a man and high fives when he did something remotely athletic. I got a nod when I brought home straight A's. Once. Still, I tried. I tried really hard to be what they wanted. I'd watch how they lit up around Celine and copy the way she spoke, the jokes she made. I even started doing chores that weren't mine, thinking maybe I'd earn their attention that way. I ironed my dad's shirts when I was 10, started making dinner when I was 11. But nothing ever really changed. If anything, it seemed to annoy them more. Things started to shift the summer I turned 12. My mom had picked up extra hours at the hospital, and my dad was working overtime to pay off some mysterious debt they never talked about. The house was tense all the time. You could feel it in the air, like static before a storm. One night, I forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer and my mom lost it. Not just the usual sigh and muttering, but a full-blown screaming fit. "Do you want us to starve?" she shouted, slamming her hand against the kitchen counter. "Is that what you want, Jonah?" I remember standing there, barefoot on the cold tile, wishing I could melt into the floor. After that, the anger didn't stop. It became a regular thing. Any mistake, no matter how small, turned into a personal offense. Nate started calling me the parasite, said I was sucking up all the oxygen in the house. I laughed the first time he said it, thinking it was a joke, but he didn't laugh back. Celine never outright bullied me, but she stopped sticking up for me, even when she saw how bad things were getting. She'd just roll her eyes and walk away. One time I asked her why she never helped, and she said, "You bring it on yourself, Jonah. You act like a victim." But the thing that really marked the change was what my dad said one morning when I asked if I could go to camp like Nate used to. It was a simple request. I wasn't even asking for anything fancy. Just a week at the local scout camp. I had saved half the money myself. He didn't even look up from his cereal. Just muttered, "Maybe if you weren't such a burden." I remember that word, burden, like it was branded into me. I carried it around after that, trying to be lighter, quieter, easier. But no matter how small I made myself, it wasn't enough. They didn't want a better version of me. They didn't want me at all. It came to a head about a year later. We were supposed to drive to visit my dad's cousin for his retirement party. 2 hours each way. I didn't want to go. None of US kids did. But when I said that out loud, my mom's eyes narrowed like I'd spit on the carpet. You don't get a vote, Jonah, she snapped. You never get a vote. And that was that. The drive was miserable. Nate kept elbowing me in the back seat and pretending it was an accident. My dad yelled at me for breathing too loudly. At one point, I asked if we could stop for the bathroom, and my mom just rolled her eyes and said, "Of course you're the one who can't hold it." We pulled off at a rest stop somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It was one of those sketchy highway pit stops with 2 vending machines and a flickering streetlight. I went inside, did my business, and when I came back out, the car was gone. At first, I thought they were playing some kind of cruel joke. I walked around the lot. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. My stomach dropped like a stone. I called my mom's phone. Straight to voicemail. Tried my dad. Same. I didn't even bother trying Nate or Celine. They never picked up for me anyway. I waited there for hours. The sun went down. The lights in the rest stop buzzed and blinked. A trucker gave me a weird look when I asked if he had a phone I could borrow. He said no and kept walking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. Eventually, I wandered into the woods behind the lot and curled up in a ditch. It wasn't deep, but it hid me from the wind. I zipped my hoodie all the way up and lay there shivering, watching the stars and wondering if this was it. If this was how it ended. Not in some dramatic runaway story or tragic accident, but quietly. Forgotten. When morning came, I walked back to the road and started hitchhiking. It took all day to get home. I got picked up by a woman and her teenage son, and I made up a story about getting separated from my family on a trip. She bought it, gave me a granola bar and $20. I thanked her, got out 5 blocks from my house, and walked the rest of the way. When I opened the door, no one even looked up. My mom was folding laundry. My dad was on the couch. Celine was painting her nails. Nate was in the kitchen making a sandwich. "You're back," my mom said, like I had just come back from school. No apology. No explanation. Just that. Something broke in me that day. Not all at once. It was more like a crack that spread slowly, year by year. I never brought it up. Never asked why. And they never mentioned it again. It was like it never happened. I moved out the second I turned 18 and never looked back. And then last week, that envelope arrived. But what I didn't expect was what was written on the back of the invite. And what my sister had the nerve to ask me. I didn't open the envelope right away. The handwriting on the back, delicate, familiar, was clearly Celine's. Elegant loops, like she always practiced in the margins of her notebooks when we were kids. The note wasn't long. 5 words, written in silver ink. "Please read what's inside." And then underneath, almost like an afterthought. "They're trying, Jonah." I should have thrown it away. I should have tossed the whole thing into the trash with the rest of the junk mail and buried it under coffee grounds and eggshells. But instead, I stood in my hallway staring at it like it was a grenade with the pin halfway out. It wasn't curiosity that made me open it. It was that old, pathetic hope. The one I thought I'd killed a long time ago. The one that whispered maybe they're finally sorry. Inside was a thick, cream-colored wedding invitation embossed with fake gold leaf. Celine and her fiancé, Marcus, smiling in watercolor pastels on the front. I barely recognized her. Her hair was shorter now, curled around her cheekbones. She looked older, more polished, like someone from a bridal catalog. But it was the folded note tucked neatly behind the RSVP card that made my hands go cold. It was from my mother. "Jonah, it's been too long. We know you've kept your distance, and we understand. Mistakes were made. But life is short. Celine is getting married, and we want the whole family together again. Your father and I would like to talk, maybe even make amends. Please come. We miss you. Love, Mom." No apology. No ownership. Just the vague, corporate-sounding mistakes were made. Like I'd accidentally been misfiled into a bad memory instead of being abandoned on the side of a highway. But the thing that hit hardest wasn't the letter. It was that Celine sent it. She was the one who folded it neatly, wrote the message on the envelope, and mailed it off like she was doing me a favor. As if this whole thing had been a misunderstanding I should get over. I sat with that for a while. Let it fester. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife a little deeper, the memories started pouring in, specifically from the weeks leading up to the rest stop incident. That's when things really got bad. That's when the mask came off. It started with money. That summer, My dad's business was tanking. The clients stopped calling, bills were stacking up, and tension filled the air like smoke. I heard them fighting almost every night. At first, it was muffled through the walls, but then they stopped caring if we heard. My mom yelled about the mortgage. My dad yelled about her picking up shifts at the hospital and emasculating him. Celine stayed late at school for yearbook committee, and Nate found every excuse to be out of the house. But I was always there. I couldn't go anywhere. I wasn't old enough to drive, didn't have friends who wanted to hang out, and they didn't let me join any summer camps. So I heard it all. Then came the budget cuts. That's what my mom called it when she stopped buying the cereal I liked and replaced it with some off-brand knockoff. My allowance, barely $5 a week, disappeared. My birthday that year was a single card from Celine with no gift inside, just a post-it note that said, "We're all struggling right now." But Nate? He still got gas money and cash for football gear. Celine got a new phone. I remember asking about it once, timidly. I'd just gotten home from the library, where I spent most afternoons to stay out of the house, and I saw Nate walking around with brand new cleats. I asked Mom how we could afford those. She didn't look up from her laptop. "They're an investment," she said flatly. "What am I?" I asked. That made her look up. "Don't start," she said. "You don't know how hard it is keeping this house afloat. You just sit there with your nose in books and think the world owes you something." I opened my mouth to protest. What exactly? I didn't even know, but she cut me off. "Grow up, Jonah. You're not a child anymore." I was 12. That became her favorite phrase. Grow up. It meant shut up. It meant stop asking questions. It meant be invisible. And I tried. I stopped complaining. Stopped asking for things. I tried to do extra chores, keep the house clean, make myself useful. But the more I tried, the more they pulled away. Nate mocked me constantly, calling me maid boy and Jonah the janitor. Celine just avoided me. One evening, we were all sitting around the dinner table. The power had gone out earlier that afternoon because they hadn't paid the bill. My mom lit a few candles and made rice and beans on the camping stove. The mood was grim, but I tried to lighten it. "I read this thing at the library," I said, "about how the ancient Greeks used to use mirrors to reflect sunlight and start fires. Maybe we could try that tomorrow if the power's still out." There was a long silence. Then Nate snorted. "Wow, thanks, Bill Nye." Celine smirked, but didn't say anything. And then my dad slammed his hand on the table so hard it rattled the silverware. "Why don't you shut up for once?" he growled. "Every time you open your mouth, it's some useless fact or fantasy. You think we care about Greek mirrors? You think that helps put food on the table?" I stared at him, stunned. He wasn't done. "You're just noise," he said, shaking his head. A constant reminder of everything that went wrong. That line. I don't think I breathed for a full 10 seconds. My mom didn't object. Celine didn't flinch. Nate just kept eating. And I realized I was alone in that house, even when I was sitting right in the middle of it. The next day, I didn't go to the library. I stayed in my room, door closed, listening to the sound of the washing machine downstairs and pretending it was ocean waves. Around noon, my mom knocked once and said, "We're going to Uncle Rick's retirement thing tomorrow. Be ready by 10. That was it. That night, I packed a bag with some clothes, a water bottle, and a few books. I had this weird feeling, like something was coming. I didn't know what, just that something was going to snap. And I was right. The next morning, I barely said a word. Neither did anyone else. We drove in silence for most of the first hour. Then Nate started whining that he was hungry, and Mom told Dad to pull over at the next rest stop. We parked beside a row of trucks, and I went to use the bathroom. When I came back out, they were gone. I already told you what happened after that. The ditch. The stars. The walk home. But what I didn't tell you was what happened when I got back. I didn't burst in yelling. I didn't scream. I walked in the back door like I had a right to be there, which I did, and found them all watching TV like it was just another lazy Sunday. "Jonah," my mom said, like she was surprised. "What happened?" I stared at her fake confusion, at Nate's smug expression, at Celine's deliberate refusal to meet my eyes. "You left me," I said quietly. Dad snorted. "You took too long. We figured you got a ride." "You left me," I said again, louder this time. My mom stood up. "Don't raise your voice." I was 12. I shouted. "You left a kid in the middle of nowhere." And then she said the thing that ended it all. The thing that burned the last bridge. "You're not a kid anymore. Grow up." That was it. I turned around, walked upstairs, and didn't come out for days. They never spoke of it again. like it was a glitch, an oversight, not abandonment. Years later, when I turned 18, I took what little savings I had and disappeared. Changed my number, moved 3 states away, built a life from scratch. And now, a decade later, they wanted me to just show up, smile for photos, play family. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was what Celine added at the bottom of her note. P.S. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't make a scene. This day is about me. As if I were the threat. As if I were the one who'd broken something. I folded the note slowly. My fingers shook, not with rage, but with something colder. Something quieter. The kind of fury that simmers for years until it turns into clarity. I wasn't going to make a scene, but I was going to do something. Because this time, they were going to remember me. Every single one of them. I didn't RSVP. I didn't reply. I didn't even acknowledge the envelope again. I left it sitting on the little entryway table next to my keys, where it stayed for 3 days, gathering dust and judgment. Every time I walked past it, I'd glance at it. Not because I was tempted to respond, but because some part of me still couldn't believe it existed. After all these years, this was the olive branch. A wedding invitation with a half apology and a warning not to ruin the mood? But if I'm being honest, it didn't just make me angry. It made me spiral. That envelope pulled me right back into a version of myself I thought I'd buried. That younger Jonah. The one who kept his voice down, who tried to stay out of the way, who convinced himself that if he just worked harder, he'd be loved. He came clawing back like he'd never left. I didn't sleep much. I kept playing their words on loop in my head, like some messed up playlist. You're just noise. You bring it on yourself. Grow up. Over and over. I stopped answering calls. Skipped meals. Ignored texts from coworkers asking if I was okay. Because here's the thing no one tells you about going no contact with your family. It's not clean. It's not like ripping off a Band-Aid and healing. It's more like cauterizing a wound. The bleeding might stop, but the pain stays, deep under the surface, waiting to flare up when you least expect it. And that envelope? That was like someone driving a knife right back into the scar. I hit rock bottom that week. And I don't mean in some movie montage, dramatic rock bottom with sad music and a rainstorm. I mean in the quiet way, the insidious way. Dishes piling in the sink. A fridge full of expired yogurt. Emails unread. Lights off even in the daytime. I didn't recognize myself. I'd worked so hard to build a stable, adult life, but all it took was 5 handwritten words and a fake apology to make it feel like none of it mattered. On the 5th night, I drank a little too much wine and passed out on the couch with the TV still playing. When I woke up the next morning, lips dry, mouth sour, neck stiff, I stared at the ceiling and muttered aloud, "This can't be it." And that was when things began to change. Not dramatically, not with some sudden burst of inspiration or a self-help book epiphany. Just a small shift. A flicker of refusal. A quiet no whispered in the back of my mind. No, I wouldn't go back. No, I wouldn't be that scared, obedient kid anymore. No, I wouldn't let them take anything else from me. They'd already taken my childhood. They weren't going to take the life I'd built too. So I got up. I showered. I shaved. I made eggs. I washed the dishes. I responded to my boss's email. Then I went to the gym, something I hadn't done in over a month, and forced myself through a 30-minute run that felt like dragging cement through quicksand. But afterward, as I stood there gulping water with my knees shaking, I felt something strange and unfamiliar. Pride. It wasn't much. It wasn't loud. But it was real. And it was mine. That was the start. Over the next few weeks, I kept doing small things. Waking up on time. Eating real meals. Journaling at night to get the nightmares out of my head. I made a list titled Things They Don't Get to Touch, and I filled it with everything I loved. My job, my friends, my apartment, my future. I taped that list to my bathroom mirror. Every time I looked in the mirror and heard my dad's voice in my head. "You're just noise." I read that list aloud to drown him out. And slowly, I began to remember who I was. I was a graphic designer for a small tech company. Nothing flashy, but I liked it. I had a cat named Hugo who sat in my lap every night while I read. I decorated my apartment exactly the way I wanted it, with shelves of thrift store books and little plants I was actually managing to keep alive. I had friends who texted me memes and invited me to game nights. I had my own Spotify account, my own weird snacks in the pantry, my own preferred brand of laundry detergent. My life wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. They didn't know any of it. And that, oddly enough, gave me power. Because for the first time, I realized I had become a full person without them. A whole, complete, three-dimensional human being with stories, scars, and dreams, and they hadn't seen a single page of the new chapters. That thought stayed with me, growing stronger each day. I started seeing a therapist, too. Her name was Dana. Early 50s, steel gray curls, no-nonsense tone, but warm eyes. The first session, she let me ramble for 15 minutes about how I didn't want to be here, how I didn't need help, how I'd gotten over it. She didn't say a word, just nodded and scribbled in her notepad. Then, when I finally ran out of steam, she looked at me and said, "Do you think it's normal for a 12-year-old to sleep in a ditch?" I didn't answer. She let the silence sit. Then she added, "Because you talk about it like it's just another thing that happened. But Jonah, it's not." That session broke something open in me. I left feeling like I'd just crawled out of a collapsed building. But I came back the next week. And the week after that. Every time, Dana asked the kind of questions I'd never dared ask myself. What did you need from them that you never got? Why do you think you still crave their approval? What would justice look like to you? That last one stayed in my head long after the session ended. What would justice look like? At first, I didn't have an answer. I didn't want to scream at them. I didn't want revenge, not in the petty sense, anyway. What I wanted was acknowledgement, validation, a real apology. But more than anything, I wanted them to know, to really, finally understand what they did. I wanted them to feel the weight of it, to be haunted by it the way I had been. And strangely enough, that wish, that quiet, burning need, became my fuel. I didn't respond to the wedding invite, but I started preparing for it anyway. Not to attend, but to confront. And not just them, Celine too. Because her betrayal wasn't loud like Nate's or cruel like my dad's. Hers was the worst kind, the passive kind. The kind that lets things happen and then pretends they didn't. She was there the night they left me. She knew. She didn't speak up then. And now, 10 years later, she wanted to play peacekeeper and beg me not to make a scene. No, not this time. I made a plan. I began organizing everything. My thoughts, my memories, even the photos I'd saved. I gathered proof of who I'd become. I wanted to show them the version of Jonah they'd never bothered to know. I pulled together snapshots of my life. My college graduation photo with no one in the crowd to cheer me on. My first apartment key. The design portfolio I'd built from scratch. My little home office. Hugo curled up on my desk. And then, in the middle of all that, I found something I hadn't seen in years. A worn notebook with duct tape on the spine. My journal from when I was 13. The one I used to write in during that awful summer. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Slanted handwriting. Smudged ink. Angry little poems and sad lists. There was one entry that stopped me cold. Dated just 2 days before the rest stop incident. I think if I disappeared, it would take them a week to notice. Maybe more. I used to believe families were like teams, but I think mine is more like a company. And I'm the intern no one talks to. I stared at those words until the page blurred. That kid. Me. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted someone to care. Someone to notice. So I made a promise to him, right then and there. I was going to make them notice. Not by yelling. Not by showing up and starting a fight. But by forcing them to see what they missed. What they threw away. I didn't RSVP to Celine's wedding. But I did start writing a letter. And I started making a package. And I started calling a few old names I never thought I'd dial again. Because I wasn't going to the wedding as the forgotten brother. I wasn't going as the burden. And I wasn't going quietly. I didn't realize how far I'd come until the day I ran into Nate again. It was completely unplanned. I'd just finished a session with Dana and ducked into a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks away. The kind with plants hanging from the ceiling and folk music playing just a little too loud. I was halfway through a lukewarm cappuccino when I saw him walk in, head down, still wearing that old high school varsity jacket like he was stuck in a time loop. For a second, I froze. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I stood up and walked straight toward him. He didn't see me at first. He was focused on the display case, probably deciding between a muffin or something he'd guilt the barista into giving him a discount on. But then he turned, and our eyes met. And man, that look. I'd spent most of my childhood flinching at that look. The smirk, the superiority, the mockery behind it. But now, it just looked tired. Like a party trick he'd worn out years ago. "Jonah," he said, blinking like he couldn't believe I existed in the same zip code. "Hey, Nate," I replied evenly. "Long time." He laughed awkwardly. "No kidding. I thought you moved too. Like, Oregon or something. Seattle, I corrected. But I'm back for a bit. He nodded, eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape hatch. You get Celine's invite? Yeah, I said. Then, after a beat, you? He scoffed. Of course. I'm the best man. Of course he was. I smiled. It wasn't genuine, but it wasn't fake either. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. That's great, I said. She must really trust you. He missed the edge in my tone entirely. Yeah, well, you know me, he said, puffing his chest a little. Family man. Guess she wanted someone who actually shows up. I could have hit him right there. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something important. Nate was still stuck in the same chapter. Still playing the same role. Still chasing the same crumbs of approval. Meanwhile, I'd moved on. I'd grown. I had something he didn't. Perspective. So I nodded, wished him luck, and left. And that was the final piece I needed. The plan started to form slowly. Not a revenge fantasy, not some dramatic soap opera plot, but a series of small, deliberate steps. If they wanted me to come back into their lives, then I would. But not as the broken kid they abandoned. Not as some cautionary tale to be pitted or ignored. I would return as a mirror. One they couldn't look away from. I started with the letter. It wasn't for Celine. It was for my parents. Typed. Single-spaced. 5 full pages. Not a single curse word. Not a single insult. Just facts. Dates. Memories. Questions. Do you remember what you said to me when I asked to go to camp? Do you remember how long you left me at that rest stop? Do you remember the name of my best friend in middle school? Do you remember my favorite book? Do you remember my birthday in 2009? I do. I spent it alone in my room eating saltines because no one remembered. I didn't write it to get an apology. I wrote it so they couldn't pretend anymore. I printed it on thick paper and sealed it in an envelope. Then I slid it into the center of a gift box filled with mementos, photocopies of my diploma, a screenshot of the design award I won, pictures of Hugo, a printout of the glowing performance review I'd gotten the month before. And at the very bottom, a picture of me, age 12, standing in front of the rest stop bathroom, looking small and sunburned and terrified. I'd taken it with a disposable camera I'd snuck into my hoodie pocket that day. I'd never shown it to anyone. Until now. I labeled the box for the ones who forgot. And then I mailed it to their address. Registered mail. Signature required. 2 days later, I got the delivery confirmation. That same night, I got a call. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. My dad's voice, rough and defensive. Jonah, we got your box. This is not the way to handle things. If you wanted to talk, we could have talked. This is just dramatic. You're making a scene. Again. That's all I'll say. Don't ruin your sister's wedding. Click. That was the moment I knew the letter had worked. Because for the first time in my life, he wasn't dismissive, he was rattled. And that was just step 1. Next, I focused on the wedding itself. I wasn't going to crash it. That would have been too easy. Too petty. No, what I wanted was to be invited, truly, formally, and to accept. Because showing up wasn't just about being present. It was about reclaiming my place. So I RSVP'd online, checking attending, and added a +1. Then I called Sadie. Sadie was my closest friend in college, sharp as a knife, fiercely loyal, and utterly unbothered by social games. We'd grown apart over the years, but when I called and explained everything, she didn't hesitate. I'm in, she said. Do I get to wear something scandalous? Only if it's beige, I laughed. Blend in. Destroy them from within. She cackled. You always did know how to throw a classy grenade. With Sadie on board, I turned to logistics. The wedding was being held at some vineyard just outside the city, a picturesque place with white gazebos, rows of grapevines, and a reception hall that probably cost more than my entire yearly rent. The guest list, from what I'd gathered, was stacked with Celine's friends, extended family, and Marcus's side, mostly wealthy business types from New Jersey. It was perfect, because in that sea of polished people, I would stand out, but not as the odd one out. Not as the black sheep. As the one who was finally whole. I booked a suit fitting. Not a rental, a real tailored outfit. Deep charcoal, subtle pattern, silver cufflinks. Clean, confident, modern. I hadn't worn a suit since college, and even then it had been thrifted. But this time, I wanted to feel the weight of the fabric. I wanted to feel worthy. Sadie helped me pick a tie. Go with navy, she said. Looks good on you. And it says, I'm composed but dangerous. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what I'm going for? Absolutely, she grinned. This is psychological warfare. Dress accordingly. The week before the wedding, I started dropping breadcrumbs. Not malicious ones, just reminders. I posted an Instagram photo of me and Sadie at a downtown cafe, captioned, "Catching up before the big day." Celine liked it within 10 minutes. No comment. The next day, I uploaded a story of Hugo sleeping on a wedding invitation with the caption, "Still deciding what to wear." And then I changed my profile picture to the shot of me from the award ceremony last spring. Me in a blazer, holding the plaque, smiling wide under a banner that read 2023 Design Innovator of the Year. Again, no comments from family. But I knew they were watching. Because 2 days later, I got a text from Celine. "Hey Jonah, just saw your stories. I'm really glad you're coming. Just maybe keep things light, okay? No drama. We're all trying to heal. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just another warning wrapped in sugar." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a group text to 2 people I hadn't spoken to in years. My mother's sister, Aunt Marilyn, and my dad's cousin, Ed. Both of them had been at the retirement party all those years ago, the one I never arrived at. They remembered. I asked them a simple favor. Don't tell anyone I reached out. But when the time came, I might need a moment of their time. They agreed. By the time the wedding day arrived, everything was in place. Sadie and I met for brunch, ran over our plan, and then drove to the vineyard. The parking lot was already packed. A valet in a bow tie took our car. I straightened my tie. Sadie adjusted her heels. "You ready?" she asked. I took a deep breath and looked out over the sea of white tents and champagne flutes. "No," I said, "but I'm doing it anyway." And with that, we walked through the archway, into the past, into the fire, and right into the heart of the people who had once left me behind, thinking I would never come back. It started with a toast. The vineyard was dressed like a dream. White petals strewn across manicured grass, strings of Edison bulbs overhead, and music soft enough to set a mood without demanding attention. The ceremony itself had gone exactly how you'd expect. Picture-perfect, choreographed smiles, vows full of cliches about forever and growth. Marcus looked nervous but happy. Celine looked radiant and invincible, like a queen confident her kingdom was intact. They didn't notice me arrive. Not at first. Sadie and I slipped into our seats near the back. We blended in, smiled politely, clapped on cue. No one whispered. No one gasped. Not yet. I waited. The reception hall was where the real show began. Vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, table numbers printed in gold calligraphy. Sadie and I found our seats, strategically placed near the cousins no one talked to, but who always paid attention. The ones who remembered things. Celine made her entrance to applause. Her dress sparkled. Her smile widened when she spotted me across the room, her eyes catching for a split second on the woman beside me. I lifted my glass in a mock salute. She nodded, tight-lipped. She'd done what she thought was right. Invited the ghost back into the family photo. Now she just had to survive the night. Too bad the ghost had brought receipts. I wasn't the best man. Nate was. Of course. He made his speech around 7:45 p.m. It was exactly what you'd expect. Bad jokes, cheap nostalgia, a few sappy lines about how Celine had always been the glue of the family. Sadie leaned over during it and whispered, "He thinks this is his Emmy moment." I didn't laugh. I was too focused. Because I knew what came next. At 8 p.m., the DJ called for a special guest who's requested a brief toast. I'd cleared it ahead of time with the event coordinator, posing as a family friend. Celine's approval hadn't been necessary. She'd see that now. I stepped up to the mic. The room hushed. Celine's smile froze. My father, sitting at the head table, lowered his fork mid-bite. My mother's face went pale. "Good evening," I began, calm and clear. "I'll keep this brief. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jonah, the youngest sibling." A few heads turned. Recognition clicked into place. Whispers began. I wanted to take a moment to congratulate Celine and Marcus. Truly, marriage is a partnership, and I hope yours is built on honesty, respect, and presence. Things that sometimes get overlooked in families. I paused. Let that hang in the air. I wasn't always part of the picture. Some of you might have noticed that I wasn't around much the last 10 years. Others might not have even known I existed. A few chuckles. Nervous. Curious. I want to be honest about something, just for a moment. I don't do this to stir drama. God knows I've had enough of that to last me. But because there are stories in every family that don't get told. And sometimes, The untold ones matter the most. Celine's lips parted, as if to object, but she stayed seated. When I was 13, my parents left me at a rest stop on the side of the highway, 70 miles from home. No phone, no money, just a backpack and a bathroom key. The room went still. I heard silverware drop, a chair creak. Somewhere, someone audibly gasped. I slept in a ditch that night, hitchhiked home the next day, and when I walked through the door, they looked at me like I was the problem. I looked directly at my father. He couldn't meet my gaze. That was the last straw in a long line of things I was supposed to just get over. But I didn't. I left. I built a life. And I thought I'd buried the past. I gestured toward the table where my box had landed, gift-wrapped and still unopened. But a few weeks ago, I received a wedding invitation. Inside it was a note asking me not to make a scene. Now I turned to Celine. I don't need to make a scene. I'm not here to ruin your day. I'm here to reclaim mine. The one I lost. The one none of you even remember. I took a breath. And I wanted to thank you for reminding me who I am. For showing me that some families aren't about blood. They're about choice. And I've made mine. I raised my glass. To truth. To survival. And to never, ever, being left behind again. I stepped down. Silence followed me back to my seat. Then, slowly, someone clapped. Aunt Marilyn. Then Uncle Ed. Then others. The applause grew, not raucous, but steady, real, acknowledging. I sat down. Sadie squeezed my hand under the table. Celine didn't speak for the rest of the night. Her smile vanished. Her posture stiffened. She greeted guests like a mannequin, barely blinking. My mother didn't touch her wine. My father disappeared outside for nearly half an hour. Nate? He looked like he wanted to hit something. He didn't. But the fury in his jaw said everything. By the time dinner was served, the energy in the room had shifted. The family's golden illusion had cracked, and people could see the seams. That was enough. We left before dessert. Sadie drove. I stared out the window, not saying much. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't even relief. It was something quieter. Peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small, or invisible, or lesser. I felt seen. And that was everything. I didn't hear from any of them for a while. Weeks passed. No texts. No voicemails. Then, slowly, the ripples began. A letter from Aunt Marilyn. You were brave. And right. I'm sorry for what happened to you. We all should have done something back then. I see you now. A message on Instagram from an old cousin who said he remembered that summer, that he always wondered why I stopped showing up. Even Marcus sent a short email. I didn't know. I wish I had. She's not ready to talk about it yet, but I think maybe she will be. Thank you for speaking up. But from my parents? Nothing. And honestly, I didn't need anything from them anymore. They had finally seen the mirror. What they did with that reflection wasn't my burden to carry. 3 months later, I donated the suit. Hugo got a new bed. I printed the photo of me giving the toast and pinned it to my corkboard with a note under it. You made it. And every time I walked past it, I smiled. Not the polite kind. The real kind. Because revenge doesn't always look like slamming doors or shouting matches. Sometimes it's calm, controlled, quietly brilliant. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is being everything they said you couldn't be. Free, happy, whole. And the final line I'll leave you with? They left me behind once. But I walked away on my own terms.